Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. And honestly, one of the things, and this is kind of what I was lamenting just a minute ago on the pre-stream, honestly one of the things that kind of try to do, and I forget to say this a lot, but it is kind of one of the big reasons for programming the way I program on Handmade Hero, is just to try to make programming to be fun instead of a drudge, or a drudge fest. And I find that for me, a big part of making programming fun is the fact that I am in control of everything and I don't have to worry about like what might be happening in some library somewhere or how something's being built or any of this stuff. It's all stuff that I can go and I can fix, and that kind of helps. And it also is, it allows me to kind of dive into stuff when I'm interested in it. I can be like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this. I'm going to go play around with this and see what the deal is here. And that's kind of exciting and fun. And so I like that. And what we've been doing lately is kind of fun too. We've been making a debug user interface for ourselves, which is kind of just really my excuse to show how to do some simple user interface programming, because I know we won't really have much of a chance to do that. On the rest of Handmade Hero, there's really no reason for it in the game. And so what I'm doing right now is sort of showing like, okay, if you want to build some user interface elements for your own use, here's how you would do them. And so just showing kind of the basic, simple way that you could construct some and give you a little sort of like primer on like, okay, here's some ways to think about UI stuff. And I'd like to jump back into that because it was kind of fun, and so I'd like to explore a little bit more of that. So let's go ahead and do that. If you would like to follow along at home, of course, if you've pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org, today is day 199, so you want to unzip day 198 source code into a directory, and that's what I'm working with now. So let's go ahead and kind of take a little moment to refresh here. So if you look at the way this stuff is working now, it all kind of works relatively nicely. We have a situation where we can sort of interact with our code and stuff here. We can make little debug variables that come out that we can modify, and we also have the ability to insert other things like profilers and stuff in here that have kind of special views and stuff like that. And we even have like little interactions that we can work on. Oh, or maybe not. Looks like we broke something. Looks like we broke something at the end of the last stream there. It looks like the resize profile thing does not always give a valid variable there. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not entirely sure why, but let's take a look here and see what actually is the problem there. So if I take a look inside here, we are in debug interact, yes. And it is interacting with this guy, var profile. What is var? So var is null at the moment, which I assume is just that we got into a resize profile somehow without setting that var, or the var got cleared. And I just kind of did some stuff at the very end of last stream, and I suspect I probably broke it, which is actually kind of good, to be honest, because I think I hinted at this at the other stream. There's some things cleanup-wise that we want to do here, and one of the reasons that you want to do them is so that you don't get a bug like this. Or I shouldn't say so that you don't get a bug like this, because obviously you don't really probably care if you get a bug like this, because it's probably not super hard to fix. But more to the point, just to make it easier for you to manage sort of the state that's happening in here, because it starts to get a little unwieldy, as you can see. And it's just nicer if you can do it. But I want to go verify that we know what the bug is first before I fix it, because I would rather not do some changes that will potentially fix that bug without knowing what the bug actually is, because we may just mask the bug at that point, and I don't like having a bug that may have gotten masked and we don't really know, and it's kind of lurking in there. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at the resize profile thing. You can see here that the only way that you can really set it to resize profile is if the next hot gets set to var. So I just want to take a look and see what's going on there. Why are we getting into a situation where next hot is not being set properly, right? Like, why is that actually happening? So let me take a look and see if I can see why that is the case. It looks like, so we are presumably setting this stuff here. Yeah, so, I mean, we're setting our debug state hot interaction, dragging hierarchy. So the only thing is, though, that just sets the hot variable. And when we begin interaction, you can see, you know what? This is the problem right here. When we made this modification to the code, right, and we accept a new interaction, we're not accepting the variable, potentially, it looks like, that we should be accepting, right? Because we're looking at debug hot and that sort of stuff here, and you can see that, that we, in this case, set it, but we don't set it in this case. So it never actually accepts that variable in the case of the hot interaction. So really, the other thing we could do there is potentially say something like, that, which is to say if the interaction got set, we always want to set that variable. So I might just go ahead and do that. And that's the bug that we had there. We're a little sloppy when we changed that, and that's fine. So yeah, so I think we should be fine now. Yeah, so there we can pull those around. We also have the ability to kind of pull off things here and drag them around and stuff like that. And so, like I said, we've kind of got the beginnings of everything here, and we've got like the basis of stuff, but it's still like kind of janky and ugly. And we don't really have we kind of haven't done the refinement necessary to make this really particularly usable. Like, it's kind of just got the beginnings of it there, but it's not actually what we want. So what I'd like to do is start kind of like poking down through this a little bit more and just start to clean up the code a little bit and make it into something a little more usable. So the first thing I want to do is we have this sort of loose concept here where we've got this notion of like what kind of interaction is happening and who is it happening with, but it's kind of all implicit in all of these things. And we have the interaction and what the hot interaction is, and then who we're interacting with and what the hot variable. We've got like a lot of stuff. And what I'd like to do is sort of take a step back there and just figure out a good way to formalize that so that we wrap it all up into something a little more logical. And what I want to point out here is essentially what we have is we have like sort of a coupling. We have sort of like a relationship here where the debug interaction that's going to happen is obviously going to happen to something. So we sort of have like an interaction and like the parameters for that interaction. And so we want something like, a debug interaction params or something like this. We want to create a structure where we can bundle these up, right? So we can say what the interaction is, and we can say like what the variable is that it's interacting with, something like this. And we can even say, in there, we can say, well, maybe it's happening with one of those, or maybe it's happening with one of these, right? And so we can sort of say like, what? No matter what you might want to put in here, we can allow you to interact with that thing, whatever that thing is. We can make lots of different things. So different interactions, if they want different things, can interact differently. And that's, totally fine. So if we wanted to do that, we just need to come up with a name for this. I'm not sure exactly what it would be. We could call this a debug interaction and this a debug interaction type. That's one way to do it. So we could say something like that. And then the debug interaction that we were talking about before is really just the type of interaction, but the interaction itself involves whatever those parameters actually were, right? And so you can kind of see those here. So if we did something like that, then we have the opportunity to like kind of clean these up, because then we have the interaction, and then we also have the hot interaction, and then we also have the next hot interaction. And now we don't have all of these different things that are happening down here that are kind of confusing and weird, right? Those things can kind of go away, and now we're sort of back to something that looks a little more sane, right? Now we can just kind of see we've got three things. We've got whichever the one is that kind of, when we do our hit testing pass, this is the thing that was like, the mouse was over. Here is the like last one that we confirmed was something that we want to consider being like hot at the time. And here is one if the user actually pulls the trigger on it. So it's like three tiers. And now they're kind of really nicely labeled, and you can sort of see exactly what's going on. So I want to start by making that simplification. And once I make that simplification, now I'm going to have a bunch of compile errors, and I'm just going to kind of sort of like go through those interactions. Go through those compile errors, fixing them to work with this new structure. That's really all I'm going to do. So let's do that now. So here we are in Draw Debug menu. And you can see, what I'm also going to do? I'm going to stop this guy from blanking all the time, since he seems, the screensaver, of course, really, really, really wants to have, its whole situation occur there. All right, there we go. I've turned that off. I want to be able to see the chat, if that makes sense. So here we go. We've got this is hot concept here, which is saying it just wants to know whether this variable that we're looking at the moment is the one that's being like hovered. And so what I want to do there is I'd like to, again, just sort of formalize this a little bit more. We now have this concept of a debug interaction, and we know what the hot interaction actually is, right? So what we should be able to do now for is hot is we should be able to say something like, well, okay, you know, for this particular item, I know what my interaction would be, right? I know which interaction I'm talking about here. In terms of the is hot item color thing. So what I want to do is basically say there's an item interaction. There's whatever interaction there would be in the item, right? And what I want to do is I want to initialize that to be whatever it is that this thing would normally, you know, whatever would normally happen here. And I think that's like this guy, right? This is the one that's sort of saying there's no specific interaction, but here's the variable, right? So here's the type of interaction. It's one of those, and here is the variable that's involved. I'll just call that var, and this hierarchy. So once I've made that item interaction, then what I can do is instead of this thing where I'm sort of doing an ad hoc comparison here, I can do something like say, you know, interactions are equal. And I can just say, whatever the one is that I was talking about, the one that I would be, does that match the hot one here, right? Because if it does, then I am hot. If not, then not. And that also means that I don't have this situation anymore, where I have to sort of think about what the different, you know, what these sorts of things are happening. We can just sort of let that happen in that, in this sort of predicate function, right? Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and take that out. So we'll just assume that that guy knows whether or not what I'm talking about is about to happen or not, and it will return it, so it can work that way. And then in here where we've got the counter thread list, we're going to do, well, let me actually just go ahead and implement the simple version of this first so that we have it there, like so. Right? And so that's just going to take two of these guys. It's just going to be like, you know, A and B. And the result of that's just going to be, you know, if the A type equals the B type, like so. And then we're going to assume, I suppose, if these are all going to be pointers for now, we can assume that we can just do something like a test here. So we don't even have to really crack these out. We can just do something like and A.test equals B.test. Or, you know, generic, something like that. Right? So, assuming that those are true, then we assume that the things are equal. And let's see. So if we move down here, what else we got? So in this state, we have the exact same situation, right? And you can kind of see what I'm doing is I'm like moving this stuff up so that it's more related. It's like, instead of having an ad hoc testing and then setting regimen where we kind of go like, let's test some things ad hoc and then we'll set some things ad hoc, I'm actually making it so that the thing that gets tested is the same thing that gets set, right? So once I test this, in here, what I would do is say like, oh, if I'm in this rectangle, then the next hot interaction is going to be my item interaction. So that way, again, we get rid of that redundancy and just say like, okay, this is the item interaction and that is what we will set here, right? And the same thing would be true here, like the next hot interaction here equals, you know, that item interaction. So then, again, you don't have that situation where there's like kind of multiple people doing multiple things that may conflict or not line up. So then the only real thing we have to do now is do that again for this guy because we have the size box. So this is like our size interaction. And the size interaction, again, is pretty rote. It's just saying the exact same thing in terms of the variable. It's going to interact with the variable. Not to be confused with the variable. Like I guess we should say interact with a variable, right? So we're going to do a resize profile thing here, and we're going to have it so that that interacts this way. Okay, and then we've got, you know, the standard stuff that we were doing before. What we want to do now when we test that is hot. Again, we want to just do interactions are equal instead. And in fact, you know what? I suppose the other thing we could do is interaction is hot. We could actually have an interaction is hot call, which actually just takes the debug state itself and then the item interaction. And so we don't even have to think about the fact that there is a hot interaction. We can just say interaction is hot and expect that it knows the fact that there is a debug state and how to get the hot interaction out of it, right? And so that would be something that just thunks through to interactions are equal by passing debug state hot interaction and letting it do that comparison, you know? So if I do that, I could say interaction is hot, right? And get rid of that whole situation that's happening there, which I don't like. And now say that I just want to say if the size interaction is the hot interaction, then I know that I'm going to have the colors like so. And that all is pretty happy and fun. Again, just cleaning it up here, next hot interaction is going to become this size interaction in that case. And then I'll go ahead and recompile. All right, so here we are. This is our kind of little hacky code, I guess, that we did that we haven't really talked about much yet. We were just kind of throwing it around, making sure we could move that stuff. So in this case, it's the exact same thing again, right? The exact same thing. And we can kind of see here, we didn't even bother because we were so lazy and it was so janky to do. We didn't even bother doing a highlight for this guy, but again, now it becomes a lot easier to do a highlight, and I think it will become easier still in a second here. But we can again just call isHotInteraction, or try to, what is it? IsInteraction hot, sorry. Whatever it is, what is it? I don't even remember now. Hot, interaction is hot. If interaction is hot, and I can pass this move interaction, I guess, that we're doing here. If that interaction is hot, we'll go ahead and do it. Otherwise not. So there we go. And I just need, again, to make one of those interactions. So here's the move interaction. And it's just going to store, again, the stuff that we were storing before. It's just these two things here. And this time it's going to store that hierarchy guy inside it, right? Like that. And that's it. And then this is actually going to do next hot interaction. It's going to do the move interaction. Okay. So moving along, now for these guys, this all needs to work slightly differently now, right? We've got hot interaction. It's debug state hot interaction dot type, right? So assuming that that's the case, then what we want to do is we want to just accept the whole interaction. And that gets us out of this business right here where we had to like pick up stuff, because now the interaction type and the thing that it's interacting with are bundled together, which is what we wanted. It's now like a logical thing that doesn't have to be like fussed with in that way. So if the hot interaction type is a thing, then that's great. If the hot interaction type is not a thing, but the hot interaction actually does have something to go with it. And in fact, now that I think about it, you know, if you really, at the end of the day, we probably just want to make this be something a little bit smarter. We could actually get rid of all of this logic, I think, probably, for the most part. You know what I'm saying? If I'm looking at this here, I feel like it's probably something we could do. Yeah. To be honest, we don't really need, I don't think, to do what we're doing here. Because like where we've got the sort of toggle value and drag value and that sort of stuff, I think probably all we need to do there is do something like this, right? We can just do something like, okay, assuming that the hot interaction actually is some kind of interaction, right, of some kind. And I'll just get rid of this thing here. Let's go ahead and do that. And what is happening here? This is if the hot interaction type, otherwise we'll just go ahead and set it to an up. Okay, there we go. So if we want to do something like this, again, I'm just trying to clean this up in stages. If we want to do something like this, what we could say is, you know, oh, if the debug hot interaction type is equal to some special thing, which is like, you know, an auto detect, right? So if it's like, you know, auto modify variable or something like this. So if we see that that's the type, then what we'll do is we'll switch on whatever the hot interaction variable type is, and we'll set the hot interactions type to be whatever it should be in that case. So it just kind of like puts it into a more tiered approach where basically we're saying like, okay, we're assuming that someone will tell us whether they want to be in an auto modify state. Assuming that they do want to be, we'll go ahead and do that, right? And similarly, we'll just assume that, oh, if it is auto modify variable, then also we'll let the alt UI kick in, where it will go ahead and change the tare value if we're in that state. And then at the end, it will just always accept whatever that hot interaction actually was, right? So that seems totes reasonable to me. And now all that means is that when we're setting none before over here, right, where we set it to debug interaction none for variables, what we actually want to do is just set it to auto modify variable, right? And that seems totally reasonable. Why does this get set? Oh, it gets set in end interact as well. Yeah, right. Okay. Okay, so that's all good, I think, and let's go ahead and fix that guy up. That all looks nice. And right, there we go. So now let's fix debug end interact. Assuming that the end interaction type is not nop, then we are going to see, I guess, what's actually happening here. And I suppose, really, this should really be like a switch, I would assume, where we take a look at what's actually happening here. I feel like, because this is essentially, this is the entirety of our UI code, right? Like, this is basically it. This is what does all of the sort of the interactions here, is these three functions. And so what I'd like to do there is just go like, okay, we have a few things that we want to do. We want to toggle the bool or expand the group on the end of it. So we probably want to do something like, okay, whatever the type is, you know, there's only, I guess, like two things that we care. Well, there's only one, I guess, that we care about. It's this one, but we might have more later. So I just want to leave that, you know, that kind of thing open, right? And then in here we could do something like this, where we just said like, all right, let's grab the var out from the interaction, like so. Oops. And then we can go ahead and work on that as well, right? That all seems fine. And then in the default case, I guess, you know, we don't really have to write in all the cases. To be honest with you, I think a lot of the cases don't need to have any writing happen. But I don't know. It's hard to say. We're going to leave it that way for now. We're just because we probably should. All right. So let's see. We've got interaction generic. We're going to clear this guy out. Dragging hierarchy doesn't exist anymore. And so that, I think, is all good. Okay, so moving on, we've got our debug interact. When we're taking a look at the interaction here, again, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing as we did before. We're just going to say, all right, if the interaction type is not, you know, nothing, then we're going to go ahead and play with it here. We don't necessarily know that we have a var, but we can pull the var out anyway, because I guess people who use it will know to use it, and people who don't will know to not. And so if we have here, like, you know, our move hierarchy, for example, now that doesn't have to be using some blind other function here. In fact, we can also we could just do this, where we pull out the debug hierarchy as well, is variable hierarchy, like so. And we can say that, where we have the variable hierarchy, and then in here we can excuse me. We can go ahead and grab that out as well. And so now we know that we're using the hierarchy that was actually associated with the interaction itself. We don't have to have some kind of mysterious extra global variable there, and that's all good. So the same thing, I think, would probably go for here. We would use in, you know, if the hierarchy is not a thing yet, then we would say that, that the debug variable hierarchy, oops, the debug state interaction hierarchy is going to be equal to this new one that we create, right? Like so. And then we will also set it equal here. And then this guy can just work off of that, right? So that's pretty straightforward. Don't think we've got much else to do, actually. We're kind of getting to the end of this porting. When we add the variable reference, again, that's going to be the interacting var, I guess. So this is like turns it originally has a var, and this turns it into interacting with the hierarchy itself, which is kind of interesting, actually. I kind of like that. Anyway, sorry, interaction. All right, so what else we got here? We've got debug state. This right here is just setting the next hot to be the hot. So this is just the hot interaction becomes the net hot interaction. That's really it. We don't need any of these other things now, I don't think. Dragging hierarchy. I don't know if that actually got set anymore. I don't think it does. No, it doesn't, so that's good. And this stuff is just like a clear, right? So the next hot interaction is just going to be, this is just going to be cleared out every time. And these guys are all just now taken care of by that one clear, I think. So let's see where we're at with that. Like just see if everything still works after all that manipulation. Looks pretty good, right? All right, so we got one here that's not good, and that is that it's trying to print out some kind of variable that doesn't actually exist yet. So that's probably not a good thing, to say the least. So that looks like, and let me take a look at what actually happened there during that add. So when we do the debug add variable reference, we use the interaction variable here, and I'm assuming that after we do that add hierarchy, it does not like that very much, although I'm not exactly sure why. So we add the hierarchy with the root group, and then we go ahead and fuss with that. So I wonder if it doesn't quite realize. So this is kind of dumb what I did here. This is actually not correct at all. Now that I think about it, this isn't going to work because this tear value thing actually needs to do something on the mouse down, because otherwise it's never going to know, because this is just a shadowed variable. These are the same variables in the union, right? So it's not going to work at all, now that I think about it, to have both of those to use that in the sort of hacky way that we were using it before. So what I should really probably do is when you do the begin interaction, that's when it should actually occur. So when you do the begin interaction and it sees that the interaction, right, is that type, right? So it'd be something like this, right? It'd be switch on the type. Well, honestly, we'd probably want to still do this part here. And then after we'd already decided what the type was, then we'd just say, okay, of the interaction types that we've got, assuming that I want to do the tear value one, then we're going to do sort of this thing here, right? That's actually the cleaner way to do it. That actually makes a lot more sense because it's actually doing the thing instead of like lazily evaluating a variable, which isn't useful at all. So if I go to tear value, then I will create the new group that we're tearing off. I'll add the reference to it, right? And off we go. But these are all on the hot interaction at this point. Although I guess, actually maybe I'll just do it on the regular interaction. So I'll say accept the interaction at that point. Well, no, you know what? I like it better on the hot. I do like it better on the hot. I think it's a little bit better that way. Okay, so there we go. So I think that's actually what I want to do. That's a much nicer system there. And there we go. So there I've pulled out the renderer, and I can drag it around, and all those other sorts of nice things. I've got the profile here, and there we go. And I can drag that box as well, and that's all good. So I think that's reasonably better now. Things are starting to clean up a little bit. They're not squeaky clean at all in terms of like things that I might want to sort of have compressed out just to get it a little more thorough. But definitely looking better than it was. So at this point, the other thing that I would like to say is, we've got that sort of sizing interaction, and I feel like that sizing interaction is probably something that you would want to have in a more generic sense as well. And so one thing that I'm wondering is, like, if we think about it here, we could do something like this, right? Where the resize profile guy, and in fact, I think this is going to be kind of neat when we actually think about this here. So if this resize profile, right, it doesn't really have to be called resize profile. In theory, it could just be called resize, I suspect. And what it could do is it could just say, instead of using the var, it just uses like the v2 that's in the hierarchy, that's in the interaction itself, like this. And it just kind of goes like, oh, okay, like, you know, I'm just operating on some position, right? And I don't care what the position actually is. Like, it doesn't matter, you know, right? I just want to write an interaction on a position like this. And then it will just work no matter what position it actually is that I was working on. And similarly, you know, like move hierarchy, for example, could do exactly the same thing. It could just be called move at some level. And it could just work on that P as well, like this, you know? So that seems like pretty reasonable. And it also seems kind of reasonable because then you could just get rid of tear value altogether if you wanted to. And you could do something like, okay, so, you know, let me go ahead and make these guys. So we've got resize and move, which are just generic operators that just operate on stuff that, you know, can tell me what position it actually wants me to do there. And here I can just say, like, okay, this is a resize action, and I'm just going to set the position to resize that profile dimension, right, or whatever it's called. I don't remember what the actual thing was called in there. It's something like that. Just, you know, something like something. It's called dimension. Oh, why did I spell it all the way out? We don't spell it all the way out anywhere else. Yeah, who knows? So anyway, we can just take the address of that, right, and then we can interact with that guy, and then that's all fine, right? So similarly, we've got move hierarchy here, and we could just change that to be move. We don't have to actually specify that's the hierarchy, and then we can just say that whatever the hierarchy's UIP is, we're just going to take the address of that, and then it will just work, you know? So all I have to do to make that happen is change these guys to like actually be pointers. Since now it's not an actual thing that we're working on, it's actually just it's actually a pointer to a v2. But I think at that point it just works with whatever you want to throw at it, right? So now I can just do something where like, okay, I'm moving well, or it just won't work at all. There's also that is another nice thing that's pretty great. Oh, whoops. That's because I don't know why I did that. That's still supposed to be dmouse p, folks. That should not have changed. So that's pretty obvious why that does work. Yeah, if you add the thing to itself, turns out it's not a very good thing. So that should be fine because that means now, like I said, we can do kind of whatever we want there. Let's get this one working as well. So now what I have to do to make that one work, since the move already works just fine, the only thing I have to do now is tear value doesn't have an interaction. Oops, doesn't have an interaction anymore. So if I go to tear value, when you actually start tearing it, what we would say is like, okay, the hierarchy that we add here, this hot interaction hierarchy, that thing, its UIP is going to start out being wherever the mouse is. And then I'm going to change our hot interaction, right? In fact, you know what? You don't even have to do this. It's just debug variable hierarchy here, where we just get the hierarchy briefly. We then say that the hierarchy's UIP is wherever the mouse started. And then we say that actually what the interaction is actually going to be about is not going to be a tear value interaction. It's just going to be a move interaction. So it started off as a tear. It becomes a move. And the thing that it's moving, you know what I'm saying, is the hierarchy's UIP. That's that's the actual vector type it's moving, right? Oops. I think I inserted an errant character there. All right, and so now when we grab this, you can see that it works exactly the way it did before, but now the move is actually it's actually moving generically. So now anything that we wanted to move could be moved that way, right? Like we don't need a specific thing. We don't need a specific one for hierarchies versus anything else that maybe we would want to move in the future, right? Which is kind of nice. And the same is true for resizing. So if we added another thing here, another type that kind of wanted to have that sort of thing to it, we could do that, right? And so let's, you know, just for sake of argument, I'm just going to show what I mean by that because it may be a little obtuse what I'm saying. And so what I'd like to do is kind of extend that notion up, just extend that notion one up. So let's say, for example, we had a debug variable that actually was like a bitmap or something. And so, like, you know, what I'm talking about is in here, if we had a bitmap ID as one of the variable types, right? Because you know we got these bitmaps and all that sort of stuff. So suppose we had like a bitmap ID in there, and one of our debug variable types wanted to be like a display of a bitmap or something. And so I guess, you know, now I think about it too, I probably want to make it so that this thing for the bitmap ID is a little bit more expressive than that. I probably want to do like a debug, you know, bitmap display or something. I don't know, something like that. So it's got like a bitmap ID, and it's got, you know, like a dimension or something, or an R32, which is like size or something like that. You know what I mean? Or I guess I should say a V2 that's like size, you know? And so if I want to do that, I could go ahead and say, like, this guy's in there. We've got a bitmap display. And, you know, and maybe this thing has other stuff like, you know, alpha or I don't know, something like that, where like it says whether or not to use the alpha channel or something like this. Who knows what's got in there. And what we want to do is be able to display bitmaps. And so what we do is we'd go into here where we're displaying other things, and we've got like our profile counter or whatever, right? And when we display this stuff, we'd have another one that's like debug variable type, and it's going to be this bitmap display guy. And I suppose I probably need a type in there for him as well. So, you know, this is like debug variable type, bitmap display. And so we throw this in here, and we say we've got a bitmap display. And then what we do is we go, all right, whatever the thing was we were doing here, we're going to do exactly the same thing. And we're just going to grab this and like literally just dupe it for now. And don't get too concerned about that. It's okay. Everyone just relax. We'll sort of take a look at that in a little more detail in a minute. But we're going to do like literally exactly the same thing here. Okay? And one thing I am going to do is I'm going to say that if you're in the rectangle of it, it doesn't have an interaction right now because at the moment we don't really have a way of interacting with bitmaps. So we're just going to leave that off for the time being. Okay, so in here, instead of drawing profile in like that, we're not going to do that, and instead we're going to use this bitmap thing here where we've got var, you know, bitmap, what did I call it? Bitmap display. And that has a dimension, so it's going to use that. And I'm going to try not to repeat past mistakes. We're going to make that dim, because that's what we had been using. So it's dim bitmap display, like so. And then the rest of this stuff is pretty much the same. The only difference is here, we're going to do a push bitmap call, obviously, instead of the rest of the stuff that we were doing. And when we have our size interaction, the size interaction will actually stay the same. It's just going to be whatever that bitmap display dim was, right? And then everything else pretty much stays exactly the same. So in the push bitmap call, again, we kind of have to now take a look at that render code, which we haven't really looked at in a while. But the thing that does push bitmap, that's going to take this stuff here, right? So it's going to take the render group, which we have. It's going to take the bitmap ID, which comes from, you know, bitmap display, whatever our bitmap ID is here. And we've got a height, and that's going to be, I guess, whatever our size p is here. So, well, I guess it's this thing. It's got the bitmap dim y. And then we've got an offset, which we don't need, I guess. Oh, well, we do need to do that. We need to place it. So we need to place it in like the center, I guess, of our region. So we have our bounds here. So I guess I'd just say get center of what the bounds are. That's where it would be, right? And we don't really care where it is in Z. So then we have a color we don't need to set. I think that's basically it for the most part. And yeah, oops, we're off to the races. So that's really it for a bitmap display. And you know, I need obviously to have some way of ever having one of these actually occur, right? So if I come into debug variables, debug, where are you? Debug variables, and I want to add one of these guys, then what I would do is just kind of do the exact same thing I did here, where we do debug add variable, and this time it's a bitmap ID, and you know, you pass the value, and I think that's all fine. Although I don't know if you can overload on these. I'll have to see if you can or not. I don't remember, but we'll see. And so then that just is a bitmap display. In here, when it does the bitmap display stuff, it's going to do bitmap display .id equals the value. We'll set the dimension to, I don't know what, you know, normally it's 100 by 100 or something, or maybe it's just like 25 by 25, maybe it's tiny. And we'll set the alpha to be true. We're not actually using that alpha yet, but might as well set it. So, what is the meaning of this? You're saying ID is not a member of that guy. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go ahead and fix that, because it shouldn't have to say bitmap ID since we know it's a bitmap. All right. So I've got that now, and I will go ahead and call it. So in here, down at the end, as part of the test, I'll just do debug variable listing to add one of these listings here. And I guess the only problem with this is I don't really know. I guess I don't really know very much about what bitmap I would add as a bitmap ID. So I'd have to kind of look it up in the asset system, to be honest with you. Like I'd have to do like get best match asset from. So I don't know, like get best match bitmap from. And we'd probably do something like this, you know? I don't know, just try to get the head in there, something like that. And in order to do that, you know, we would need, let's see, we would need to actually have the assets, which I don't know if we do. I don't know if we do at this point. Since we're just kind of hacking around, I will see if maybe we do have the render group at this point. I just don't know if we've created them yet. And let's take a look and see if we have or if we haven't. So there's that debug state coming through. Where are we here? No, that's not it. We need to look at where we call debug create variables. So here it is. We're in debug state. So we get the assets passed in, and so we could actually do it here. In fact, let's just do it out where we actually have that. So here we go. So if we were in here where we do the profile and that sort of stuff, I'm going to go ahead and do this sort of thing, where we go ahead and add it maybe right here, in fact. That seems a little bit better to me. And then when we add this this guy here, there we go. I will see if that worked. So in here we'll do debug, got the context, debug add variable reference. This is going to be like our test bitmap. Here's our ID for that bitmap. And let's see how that works. Let's see how that goes. Entity, facing direction we don't care about at the moment. Debug variable reference, none of the two overloads could convert all of the argument types. That's entirely possible. Let me take a look and see. Debug add variable, bitmap ID value, so it's context, name, and bitmap ID. That's seems, oh, because it should be just debug add variable. That's why. Should not be variable reference. So let's see if that's going to work. I don't know if, oh, and now we are supposed to just be using assets directly. That's the whole reason I put it there, was so we didn't have to go access something that we hadn't actually done yet. So okay. So I don't know if this will actually work. I don't know, and I don't really know. I guess it's okay to keep that assert there, because just so we know when we're not writing things out to the config file, I suppose it's better than not knowing. It's going to be a little bit of a pain because it's going to assert every time we add a new type, even though a lot of the times we don't actually want to write the types out. You know what I mean? So that's a little bit annoying, but you know, it's fine. So this is a bitmap display. And I feel like, is the profile, how is the profile stuff intercepted? Oh, it's in debug should be written. So the way that we've decided to do this is with debug should be written. And so I guess we'll just do it that way, right? So we know that these guys are not. And what we could do in the future is kind of segregate those into a set where we can just do a range check. Like here's the ones that are written, they're, you know, this range of values, and here's the ones that aren't, right? So yeah. So anyway, okay. So anyway, point being, right, it's pretty easy for us to create a thing here where we can just really trivially still use the same resize interaction to resize it. And this is actually the bitmap. We just have one problem here, which is that the offsets, the alignment offsets and everything, are still going to be used because that's sort of the way that they're defined inside the renderer, right? So if you look at here, you know, when it does this push bitmap call and does all these sorts of things, it's still going to do like alignment and all that kind of thing, right? It's going to do like the get bitmapped in thing where it does all this sort of stuff. And you know what we would rather be able to do is be able to sort of push one of these things a little bit more directly, so that it didn't do a lot of that stuff where it goes through the alignment and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't know what's the best way to add that here because it's a strictly debug function. You know, I could add a flag that gets pushed on here. I'm a little reticent to do that, but you know, it seems like the easiest thing to do would be if you added something where it was like, no, trust me, I want you to do this a little more specifically, you know, and it would do that for you. So I'm trying to think how I'd want to do that. And it would basically be something where, you know, it doesn't go through the transform. It just gives you kind of the direct interpretation of that particular bitmap. So yeah, how would I want to do that? And I suppose what I could do is make a separate function for doing that, but one which was not doing this sort of nonsense where, you know, which had this stuff baked a little bit more directly, right? Because if this stuff, part of the problem here is when it does the get bitmap call, this sort of stuff is baked into the push bitmap. So if I were to duplicate the push bitmap call to have another one, I'd have to duplicate all of that, and I don't want that. I want that running through the same code path. And so I'm not sure how I would want to do that exactly, because this is the actual function that kind of needs to be specified. And so it's a little bit, it'd be like you'd have to have a preamble and a postamble for it, which is just a little janky. So I think, I think I may not quite do it that way. So these guys will all still work. The only thing I want to get rid of is that Hadamard for the alignment, you know? And so if we look at what's happening with that alignment, really all it does is it modifies that offset. And so I feel like probably what I want to have happen there is allow you to specify some kind of a multiplier on that alignment, right? Like I want something like a coefficient you could multiply to turn the alignment off if you wanted to, something like that. Yeah, this sort of thing. You know what I'm saying? And then what would happen in here, right, is you'd have one of these as well. Again, I don't love it, but it's the thing that comes most to mind at the moment. And so I'm going to go with it for a second, and we'll see what happens here. And so, yeah, if you call push bitmap here, when you do the push, again, you can specify that if you want to as an optional parameter. And that will come through like so. All right, so let's see here. We've got a get bitmap call. Ooh, I just kind of had a slight idea. I have an idea. I have an idea. That's in the wrong place. All right. So if I go through here, what's this? This is on the code point stuff. So these guys, obviously, when they call get bitmap bim, are going to want to use the standard alignment. So that's all good. But now in the debug code, we can go ahead and turn that off now. So we could say, let's see here, inside that that code where we do bitmap display, we could just say like, okay, when we're going to do that that push bitmap, we would like you to nullify the alignment transform. We don't want you to do that. That's like not on the table, right? Okay. So now, of course, the other thing I have to think about is what happens when you nullify the alignment. If you nullify the alignment, then the bitmap would be in the bottom corner. And so we also have to translate our stuff so that it's at the bottom corner. I think right now I'm passing the center because I don't even know why I decided to pass the center. I just randomly did. So I think we want to do to get the min corner of our bounds, I think is the way that that routine works. Pretty sure, not 100% sure. And yeah, that does look like it. And that's the correct size as well, because again, when I exported these bitmaps, I didn't actually trim them. So they are actually, it's the whole size of the guy, he just doesn't have anything down there. So that's actually correct, which is kind of cool. So yeah, so that's all good. That's what we wanted. And we could also draw the bounds of the guy in there. So for example, I could do something like this, where I put a rect in there, where we just say like, okay, whatever the bounds of this thing is, this thing right here, and there's no hot for it. It's just gonna draw like some black stuff on the background behind the bitmap, so that you can see it. There you can actually see the actual bitmap in theory. Of course, I also, at this point, I guess, have the problem if I use the width, I always maintain the aspect ratio of the bitmap, which honestly I think is probably something that we would want to do. Like I feel like that's something that is desirable. So I'm not sure what I would want to do to sort of, I don't really want them to be squishy. And so what I could do is make it so that this actual thing, when you drag it, always does actually maintain the aspect ratio as well. Just by, it'll take the, it would take sort of the height and always multiply it out. That's not really that hard to do, believe it or not. I know it sounds a little bit tricky, but at the end of the day, it's actually not so bad, because if you look, for example, at how the bitmap stuff actually works in here, you can actually get the bitmap information pretty easily yourself, right? You can get this used bitmap dim, and you can do sort of this whole process at some level. So if I wanted to, I could do something like, let's see here, get bitmap dim, like we're actually doing for the fonts, right? And so you can kind of see it happening here, where I could just do that exact same thing for the bitmap display. And right in line with it, I could say like, okay, let's see what the bitmap actually is, whatever that bitmap actually is, that we're going to be looking up. So I can just go like, all right, whatever the bitmap display is, whatever that ID is, I'm going to go ahead and grab that. So tell me what that is, and then I'm going to get the dimensions of it back, right? And I don't know what the bitmap scale and bitmap offset things are here, but I assume that they're just going to be whatever I was passing in for this stuff, right? They're just going to be whatever, when I call push bitmap, they're going to be whatever I was passing in here. So this would be, again, the scale. And I guess I could sort of formalize those. I could just say the bitmap scale is whatever I was going to pass in here, and then I'll just actually pass it here as well, bitmap scale. And the bitmap offset is going to be this stuff, right? So like the X part of that won't change. So this stuff can actually come out here because the min corner is just the min corner. we don't even have to do the bounds part, I guess, because the min corner is known. So this part was really kind of redundant. I can just say min corner, and I think we're good, right? So I can just say there's the min corner. In here, there's the min corner again, something like that. And that should do it, right? I think that all works. Now, it won't actually do anything now. I just want to test to make sure we're still displaying properly. We are. And so now if we want to make it be aspect ratio correct, all we would have to do is say, you know, fix that size. Since we're only using the size y, just fix the size of the variable itself to actually use the dim that comes back in x here, right? That makes sense? So I think that's really all we need to do. Oops. I don't actually remember what this has on it. It's called size. Because of course, I always have to call dimensions something different, apparently. That's just my thing. All right, so let's see if that does it a little bit better. And there we go. So now, you know, again, we've kind of got it locked a little bit better. And now we can see the actual bitmap, which is kind of nice as well. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, well, I guess there's not a lot more to it than that. That's kind of just the way that goes. And again, so that was just kind of me showing how you could overload the same interaction, right? Use that same code to just do it. And you could sort of see the other nice thing about that was that, again, because of the way that this UI code is written to be sort of more, it's designed to sort of be more flexible and more about debug stuff where you can just add things quickly and you don't have to spend a lot of time fussing with giant frameworks or hierarchies or stuff like that. Doing something like constraining to an aspect ratio is as simple as just when I'm going to display it to just look at the aspect ratio and fix it, right? I didn't have to go like overload a bunch of crazy code or do anything weird. You just go into the place where it does and you know, you fix it. And that's the really nice thing about doing UI this way as well, especially because, you know, in a debug scenario, the most important thing by far is that you can add stuff like that easily if you want to. And so, yes, you can see how that's, you know, 10, 20 minutes to add a display for bitmaps that works right directly in our system and loads exactly the thing and all that stuff is pretty great, right? And to have, you know, you have resizing and all that sort of stuff as well. And again, it also, you know, like obeys all of our stuff and does all that things. So, yeah, so that's pretty good, and like I said, that's kind of the goal of this sort of stuff. So we're getting a little further, right? We've abstracted our interactions work pretty well. Where we're not quite at yet, we've got a couple things we need to do. Like we're not quite at yet is this stuff is still kind of janky. It's kind of all over the place, not laid out very well, and we're still doing a lot of that code manually, right? You know, with what sort of the sizes of things and that sort of stuff. And we don't even have clipping passing through, right? So things can draw over the end there, which in this case I suppose we kind of want, but you know, in general we probably don't want. We would like to be able to not have that. So I think focusing next, kind of now that we've got the interactions cleaned up a little bit, maybe next we kind of start to clean up that that other part of the, you know, of the whole situation. Now, again, we do have sort of a thing that we could decide to address here as well, and I don't know if we want to, but we could. And that is that you'll notice that we sort of have this notion that over here there are like these parameters that are associated with the viewing, which are maybe not so associated with the variable. And what that means is that, you know, when we pull something out and we're looking at a particular debug value, we don't have the capability to have these things be different sizes. And that's another thing that maybe we might want to do, which is just a structural change that we could do where the sizes could be separate on different ones. And I think that might be something we want to do because at the very least, I think, why am I not grabbing that? Okay, there we go. At the very least, one thing that I think we would want to do is we'd want to make it so that like the collapsibility is separated. So that's also something we could do, and maybe that's the best thing to do tomorrow. All right, for now I'm going to try to go to a Q&A, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's actually going to work because my internet is not really able, for some reason, to get reliable data back from Twitch. It just, like right now it just says, sorry, we were unable to connect to chat, reconnecting in 2 seconds, and that's all it says, right? So I really just don't know what to do about that. I wish I did, but I will try to see if I can go to the thing. Ladies and gentlemen, never like actually like reinstall a system. Like this, basically what happened is I reinstalled Linux on this system, and now like the Wi-Fi doesn't work and everything else. You know how it is. All right. Okay, I can actually see the chat now. So maybe try to throw a Q colon or two towards me that I can answer, just so we can have some semblance of a Q&A. And I'll try to figure out why the wireless doesn't work on this machine anymore, although I guess the answer is probably just that Linux doesn't work. And there you go. So yeah, do we have any Q colons? By any chance? Any Q colons? Anyone? Anyone? Of course, there may be tons of Q colons that I just can't see right now, is the other thing. So that's kind of also a lovely aspect of the whole situation, which is pretty fantastic. Okay. Oh, so I actually can see some Q colons. How about that? Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but is it desired behavior for the tear feature to tear all groups below it, even if they are on the same level in the hierarchy? I would think you would only want to tear the current group and subgroups, not other groups on the same level. For example, you wouldn't want the profile group to get torn when you tear the particles group. Yeah, this is why I was saying, like, so right now, all we're doing is we just tear whatever the actual thing is. We just tear a reference to that thing. And so whatever that thing was doing, it's not even really a copy at all. It's just a pointer to here. And so anything that you tear, you're going to get the stuff below it if you were one above, right? For the most part. And so that's, again, something that I'd like to fix structurally, because I want to fix the fact that they both expand, because like I said, right now we don't actually ever run a copy, and we want to sort of actually clone the references, which is again really easy to do, but we have to actually do it. So we should do that. If I bought a ticket for the con that I can't use, can I donate to someone? I don't see why not. You could always email me and tell me what your order number was, and I could change the name to somebody else's name if you would like. Can the new bitmap display be torn off as well? Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, like I said, the tearing stuff is a little zygote-ish at this point, but it seems like it would be able to. I'm not sure. I guess right now. So the only reason we can't tear it off right now is because there's no interaction set up for it. So here's the deal. We would need, so this part prevents it from being, the fact that this is not set up is the thing that would prevent it. So if we did that, if we actually allowed it to have an item interaction, so it knew it was an item, then I think we could just tear it off like so, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's fine. But you have to have an item interaction, because if you don't, then you can't actually do that. So, you know, but well, you know what we could do, actually, is we could say debug interaction, tear interaction, right? And you could just say tear interaction type equals not. Is it not? Or is it auto modify variable? So I don't remember exactly what we said the criteria was. The tear thing is, like I said, a little bit janky. Alt UI, so only if it's auto modify variable is the only kind. But what I could say is, it's just like, I could just say, you know, it's tear, it's always tear. And so tear interaction dot var equals me, which is this var. And so then there wouldn't be an interaction other than tearing. So basically just be like, okay, you know, or maybe not. Huh. All right, so I'll be honest, I don't understand why that didn't work. I would have thought that I would be able to tear that value off. Oh. Not if I don't ever actually tell it that that's the interaction. That would do it. So now the default for bitmaps is just a tear, right? That's just the interaction that they do. So. Let's see here. Insofar as, is it worth doing so much UI work if the game will not feature much UI? So I'm not sure what the question is. Are you asking like if you were on a game project and you had to like make a decision about how much time to spend on UI? I would say in that case, the answer is probably definitely yes, because we haven't really spent any time on UI. I mean, you know, like if you're going to make a debug UI, you should spend a couple weeks on it, I would think. So I would think you'd spend, you know, I'd probably spend, you know, 2-3 weeks at least, which is something like 90 hours of programming time probably. And so all told, we'll probably have spent like 25 hours or something like that, which is actually pretty low. Now, if you're asking on Handmade Hero, should we spend time on it? I would usually say, like, I think we should spend time on Handmade Hero on anything that's an interesting programming thing that's worth exploring, right? That people should probably know how to do. Usually I try to do some of it, you know? And so will we make the world's best UI system? No. But we will have something relatively decent, like I said, which we kind of do have now. It's not quite there yet, but, you know, a couple more days and I think we'll be in pretty good shape for the stuff that we might want, you know? So. The Sizik, can you add variables to change the match vectors? We could. Yeah. It might take a little while, and there's some things we would want to probably think about for that. But yeah, I mean, obviously we could. I do not see any more Q colons. Have we come to the Q colons? I mean, if you, again, like if you wanted to have the match variables be changeable in that way, then one of the things that you'd have to do is that you'd have to query them like every time you drew it. So you wouldn't be storing a bitmap ID. You'd actually store a type and a vector. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you know, and I guess you wouldn't have to query it every time you do it. You'd have to query it every time it changed, I suppose. But Branagor, will there be a menu system like pressing start in Zelda to change items? Nothing fancy, but just something to get us started on how to do it. No, not in this game. There is not that kind of interaction. I don't really like those very much. I find them to kind of really take you out of the game. And like basically inventory screens I really, really don't like a lot. Like, I mean, I think there are some ways you can do them that maybe I don't dislike, but like those kind, like specifically the Zelda kind, I really very strongly dislike. I feel like they take you really pretty far out of the game experience, and I don't like that. So I can't remember. There was a game like like Dead Space or something, where they did the UI in the game or whatever. And those are a little bit better, but all right, I don't see any more Q colons, so I'm going to assume that we have Q coloned out. Let's see. Let us see here. Alrighty. Thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along yourself with the source code at home, you can do so. You can go to handmadehero.org. The source code comes with pre-orders of the game, so if you pre-order the game, you get the source code even at the moment while we are still in the midst of developing it. So you can check that out. We also have a Patreon page. If you want to support the video series, you can always subscribe there. You can also go, we have a forum site where you can go to ask questions and watch the annotated episode guide to catch on like past videos. We have a tweet bot, which of course I forgot to update this weekend, but normally almost every weekend I remember to update the tweet bot. So the tweet bot can always tweet out the schedule at you. So if you want to catch the stream live, that's the easiest way to do it. That's it for today. I will be back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, same place. Where we'll do a few more debug UI things in the sort of like in the pursuit of just getting it to a place where we can do most of the things that we want to do. And we have a few more things we'd like to be able to do. And a big one there is being able to really easily inspect our performance profiles and any other profiling that we may want to add. For example, if we want to add some memory profiling in the future, which is a big one that I would like potentially to add, that would be something we'd want to be able to show there. And so we don't really quite have the UI at the point now where it's been polished enough to be able to really do stuff like that. And so that's the thing that we really kind of want to push on. So another couple of days of pushing and I think we'll be there. Until then, well, assuming I will see you tomorrow. Until then, have fun programming and I'll see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.